No, I know I'm one that shouldn't be preaching healing. But the thing is, I feel an obligation, strange obligation, to kind of get my thoughts out, and I'm not very good at writing stuff down. So, that's why I make these videos, is to just kind of get it down, because otherwise it's gonna be born with me, die with me, and that just seems kind of pointless. And so I wanted to talk about how, like, materialism kind of bound itself to my identity. And I feel like a lot of people went through this, where they went years and years and years, even decades, from kids. They'd lose everything, and start all over. And I did that so many times, like the guy that moves in with the girl, and then they break up a few months later, and then he moves in with another girl, starts all over. And that creates a different kind of loneliness, because you're stretching yourself out to find something, rather than you know being comfortable within. You're just trying to get by using. And that's pretty much the path of least resistance. If you have a social capacity, but you're also a bum, people are going to take you in because you connect to them on a certain level. But that trains the brain to keep doing that over and over again. And then people are talking about, you destroyed their life, you used them, they were nothing but a ladder to something better, and all that guilt tripping. And it's just like, people don't even understand their own psychology. So, you're creating the problem. You're going to deal with the problem. Cause and effect. And so, like, when I got with my wife originally, after that, it was like everything I gained, it was like it bound itself to my identity. I felt like whenever I started losing stuff, I felt like I was failing in my relationship. And that's when I got to the point one day, well, not one day, over a long period of time, I started realizing that that was the connection. And I started thinking to myself, why does this stuff really matter? Why does this materialistic stuff even matter? I mean, yeah, I spent a ton of money on this stuff over years. I started thinking, I grew up in a poor family, and, kind of meeting new people, it was always new experiences for me as a kid, because it's like some of those people were extremely nice. And if you're in your house all the time, you're not meeting those people. So you meet those people in an off chance when you're an isolator, especially when your parents are isolators. Then the kids lack that experience of being around people, being around friends, and people they wouldn't have met otherwise. And I started thinking, you know, if I do lose this house, it doesn't mean that everything is gone. It means a new problem to solve. And of course, I keep on the back thought that, everything's getting more expensive, and everything's tightening up, and everything's changing. And so I guess that's kind of what, you know, made me freak out too. That materialism was attached to me even stronger, because I was worried about the future. And when you can predict so many futures, it's like, well, which one do I settle with and say, okay, that's going to be the one, and make your mind stick with that one perspective. And the thing is, like, the perspectives in my head are like here and gone. It's like I'll read a philosophy, and it's like watching a movie for me. As soon as that movie's over, I remember a few key points, but the rest of it, I don't remember conversations or anything. They might come to me, a year later, like, oh yeah, they said that in that movie. And so it's like the same with perspectives. That's why, a lot of times I have those mood changes, because my perspective changes on the drop of a dime. It's like, a quick storm, you get a little bit of rain, that's when the perspective's there, and then it moves on. And it's like, okay, well, that only lasted about 5 minutes. Why was I even thinking that way? And then it's like, well, what was I even thinking? Okay, never mind. It doesn't even matter right now. It's like I can read a book and, you know, I'll end up disassociating because I'm picturing what's happening in the story, and then I start focusing again. I'm like, whoa, I just missed like the last two paragraphs. I've read them. I know I read them line by line, but I missed everything there because I was picturing it all in my head. So it's like you always feel that rush to get things done because that time dilation is really gonna, you know, smack you in the face, especially when you're around people and they don't understand what you're doing. They think you're just high, and you're like, whoa, I'm 3 years old again. And I remember, this happening. I remember I was playing in a pond and, got bit by a frog. And like, when did I get bit by a frog? When did that memory get put there? So it's a very strange universe that we live in. And it's a very creative place, but it can also be a very dark place. So when you connect materialism to this darkness, well, guess what happens? You're going to have more than one shadow, because all your shadows are going to try to pull you in a different direction. You're given into this vulnerability of feeling like a burden to your family because you're not doing enough. When some of you are just trying to play the Powerball and hoping that one day you'll win millions. And so, you find those little fillers within the week to have your mind focus on, like, I got 8 more hours of work, and it's like, I need something to take my mind off that. So the time dilation kicks in. Well, then it's like that movie Click. Once you start hitting that button, the auto programming kicks in, and well, shit. Like, a lot of people are blessed with the ability to see things that other people can't, and they're made vulnerable because of it, because they don't understand it themselves. So they think they're just an extra piece of the puzzle that wasn't even supposed to be in the box in the first place. So then they're talking about, well, why were we even born in the first place with no purpose, no meaning? And the thing with me is, I have God on a personal level, not collective. I don't need to prove my religion to anybody. So, you know, but the blessings really, they come in. And if you just happen to be mature enough or ready for that perspective, then that's when you can consider it a blessing and actually feel it as a blessing, no matter how small, how big. Any little bit of progress, it means you're going in the right direction, right? A lot of us focus on materialism, so we want to jump ahead and have everything, and then you reach the end game. Well, the end game in every game is limited. So what if you're dopamine driven and you do the most extreme thing you can, how are you going to get the dopamine after that? You have to rewire yourself to appreciate the small stuff and then work your way back up to the big stuff. That's how I can see it happening now with people that can't rewire on their own. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out.